Good morning. Welcome to the Science of Mind class. I'm Dr. Petra, and I'm just love being with you guys on Sunday morning. I was just telling Richard and Ryan how much I enjoy being with them on a Sunday morning as we do our Science of Mind class together and go a little more deeply. So we're in physical perfection. We're in the section called Healing is Clear Thinking on the bottom of page 204 and 205, if you are following along. And we're talking about spiritual mind healing and the opportunity that we have to really make a difference working with our doctors and our therapists, and alongside all of our natural remedies, we also work on the spiritual level of consciousness. And learning how to do that really brings the whole thing together, so that when we're working at every level, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, the whole process is engaged and aligned. But before we start, one of the things we're noticing is that sometimes our stuff that we send out goes into spam. And so I want to remind you that on Thanksgiving Day at 11 o'clock, we're having a gratitude celebration. On Thanksgiving Day, we're going to have it outside unless the weather is really crappy, and then we're hoping to be having it inside. It's an hour of gratitude. So we need you to RSVP to let us know you're coming and who you want to sit with. But almost more importantly, we're celebrating Reverend Patty's 80th birthday. So we will be having gratitude for her during the celebration. After the celebration at noon, we're having a drive-through birthday parade for Reverend Patty. So decorate your cars, bring her a balloon or a card, and we'll have a big, long snake of cars that'll go by Reverend Patty. You'll get to stop and wish her a happy birthday. We're celebrating Patty's 80th birthday in as big a way as we can possibly imagine. So we want to make sure that you get this information. So RSVP to come to the celebration itself. That's the only part you have to RSVP to. If you want to just do the drive-through, which we're hoping 150 people will come to celebrate Patty, on your way to whatever you're doing with your family or go back home, that you do not have to RSVP to. Okay, so Thursday, Thanksgiving, 11 a.m., celebration, 12 noon, drive-through parade for Reverend Patty. Okay, so be there, be square. That's all I have to say about that. Okay, so carrying on. We're on page 204, and we have been talking about this idea that healing is clear thinking, that if you have ever thought of yourself as subject to anything, to erase that thought by remembering that there's nothing that is causal, that is more causal than spiritual truth. It's only causal because we believe it's causal until we're talking about spiritual truth. And when we align with spiritual truth, there's nothing that can stand in the way of that. So this is the bottom of page 204. When you are giving a treatment, you are thinking, you are meeting, opposing, neutralizing, erasing, and obliterating whatever the trouble may be. Let me read it again. You are meeting, opposing, neutralizing, erasing, and obliterating suppression, fear, doubt, failure, morbid emotion, and sense of loss, whatever the trouble may be. Right? So there's a lot of our spiritual mind treatments where we're allowing things to move through us, and especially when we're working with the law of growth and we're accepting how beautifully it all unfolds, and we're, and all of that sort of thing. But when we're talking about physical healing, we're being very direct and very concrete and very specific that we expect this particular aspect of the physical body to realign with spiritual truth. And we are using our spiritual denials. We're not denying the experience. I mean, it would be silly to say to somebody, you're not in pain. Of course they're in pain. And the pain is a real experience of a real symptom. It's not just in their heads. But we are doing the spiritual work, if you so will, at the quantum level. We're changing the quantum field, the field of consciousness, so that something new is actually manifested in physical form. And so we are deliberately meeting, opposing, neutralizing, erasing, and obliterating suppression, fear, doubt, failure, morbid emotion, and sense of loss, whatever the trouble may be, including the belief in inherited diseases, including the belief that it's inevitable, including any fear that we have around it. Every time your thought hits fairly and squarely, it erases just as definitely as one would erase a chalk line. Such is the mystery of the appearance and the disappearance of thought. Now, this is one of the reasons why we do affirmations, because we're using those affirmations not only in our spiritual mind treatment, but in general, to keep building that synaptic pathway, to rewrite the grooves in our thought, which Troward talked about in 1906, and neuroscience has been talking about, in the fact that we can rewrite the patterns in our brain. And it is the repetitive, habitual thinking. Right? So you can't do a spiritual mind treatment about being healthy and then spend the rest of the day angry, worried, frustrated, reacting to the outer circumstances or even the circumstances in our bodies. We want to continue to affirm the spiritual truth and spiritually deny anything that we think might be holding that experience in place, right? We are going to spiritually deny. We're going to deny that there's anything in the universal law or life, power or presence that wants us to be sick, that thinks it's teaching us a lesson, that has caused this in any way, shape, or form. No. The divine pattern is a pattern of wholeness and perfection, even if it looks a little different than the pattern of wholeness and perfection in the way it shows up in someone else. It can be different without being ill or diseased or sick. And we are saying there's nothing in the universe holding that in place. So on the one hand, we're erasing the chalk line. We're literally erasing the old pattern and putting a new pattern down. Putting a pattern down that accepts this wholeness, that affirms this spiritual truth, that affirms that the divine pattern is more powerful than the experience that we're having. So in one sense, we think of it as a very definite erasing. But there's also something about the shifting of consciousness as a whole. And so we go on to read, right thought, constantly poured into consciousness, will eventually purify it. Should we read that again? Right thought, constantly poured into consciousness, will eventually purify it. So two things, right thought, not right and wrong, but right as in thought that is in alignment with spiritual truth. Constantly, not sometimes, not when I feel like it, not when I feel good, not when I feel like I'm not reacting, constantly, over and over and over again, poured into consciousness, right? Our thinking means that the I that I am is deciding what we are going to focus on. This does not mean, oh, I'm having a linear rational thought, right? No, it means that I am paying attention to what my entire consciousness is fixated on. And that is head and heart combined. That is mind and emotions combined. And because we don't just think in a linear rational fashion. When we're thinking, we're always, mind and heart are always jointly engaged. And so poured into consciousness, this is the consciousness that we're shaping over and over and over again in our own minds, and it will eventually purify it. Discord might be likened, or disease might be likened to a bottle of impure water. Healing might be likened to the process of dropping pure water into the bottle, a drop at a time, until the whole is clean and pure. Someone might ask why the bottle could not be turned upside down and at once drain out all the impurities. Sometimes this happens, but not often. Meanwhile, a drop at a time will finally eliminate the impurities and produce a healing. So let's stop right there. So let's just talk about, let us be very clear that there is a place for Western allopathic medicine. Western allopathic medicine is brilliant in a crisis. You broke your leg, you need surgery, you got some really horrific thing that you want to work with right away. And as long as we're not, over medicating ourselves or over surgerying ourselves, there's really nothing wrong with allopathic medicine in a crisis. If it weren't for Western medicine, my son and I would both be dead in childbirth. And I am eternally grateful that they knew how to deal with that crisis. Spiritual mind healing can really support the process in a crisis. I think I've told you the story. A friend of mine, years and years and years ago, lovely couple in our community in Renton, Washington, had a massive heart attack. They didn't expect him to live the night. All the x-rays showed that he had had heart attacks before that there was all kinds of damage to his heart. And I got the call at 3 o'clock in the morning, come, he's not expected to live the night. So I came. They were both practitioner students. They had been in our community for quite a while and were deeply practicing. The three of us stood in his room, and for 45 minutes I did a spiritual mind healing treatment for health and wholeness to his heart and for perfect alignment with the divine pattern of wholeness in his heart. He did not pass away that night. When I left at 8 or 9 in the morning, the nurses were stunned that he was wanting to have a little bit of food to eat. Later that day and the next day and the third day, they kept x-raying his heart because they couldn't understand why there was no evidence of a massive heart attack. And all of the scar tissue was gone. His heart was perfectly healthy. They had no explanation for it. Right? Spiritual mind healing and working in a crisis can also absolutely affect change. But let's be clear. The best thing that spiritual mind healing is for are those chronic ailments, those long-term ailments that allopathic medicine, Western medicine, normally doesn't know how to treat or simply treats with drugs, because so much of that is an outpicturing of what's going on in our consciousness. And so that slow and steady drip, 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 right? I think of it as Chinese water torture on our diseases, Chinese water torture on our illnesses. Let's just drip it right out of our consciousness by constantly affirming spiritual truth. And so we simply purify the consciousness every day doing the spiritual work in our meditation, affirming that we know what's true about life and love. In our spiritual mind treatment, affirming what we know to be true about our physical well-being. In our lifestyle, affirming that everything we do is supportive, releasing our stress, working with releasing toxicity in all the different ways, right? And we begin to slowly but surely purify the consciousness, and it purifies the physical expression of that consciousness. And so a drop at a time will finally eliminate the impurities and produce a healing. And so this is our project when we're doing spiritual mind healing. It's very deliberate, very direct, and yes, it may be very different than when we're doing spiritual mind treatment, and we're doing spiritual work to have a deeper realization of the divine presence and knowing that our life flows more effortlessly, right? And there's all kinds of times and ways and places when that's appropriate. But when we have decided that we're going to do a healing for ourselves or for a loved one, that power is available to us, and we should not be afraid to use it. And I think that's sometimes why we don't, is because what if it doesn't work? Will we stop believing in our truth? Will we stop believing in these words that we say? And so we might fudge our treatments. Well, healing if it's in the best interests. The best interests is whatever we decide it is for ourselves and whatever someone else has decided for themselves. We do the treatment they want, not the treatment we want for them. We do the treatment they want. And so we are constantly purifying. And again, we are meeting, opposing, neutralizing, erasing, and obliterating suppression, fear, doubt, failure, morbid emotion, and sense of loss, whatever the trouble may be. A fear around the disease, a morbid sense of, I brought this on myself, or, oh my God, this is never going to get any better, or isn't it terrible and awful? And all of these things we are obliterating with our determination to decide what we're going to pay attention to and to stay utterly fixated on it. And of course, we have lots of documented opportunities to see this. Again, I recommend Terry McBride's book, The Hell I Can't. Also, Joe Dispenza has extraordinary story about his own healing of his back. Lots of documentation that this actually does work, and that it can be used in conjunction with any other methodologies that we're doing. All right, so I feel like I'm pounding on my table. This is so important. So we're going to stop there. And yeah, just check in with you guys. What do you think about this willingness or this need, or how just being so definite and clear about it? Are you willing to do it? What stands in your way of doing it? Why aren't we always as just, put a stake in the ground? So we're going to stop and see what comments and sharings you have, questions, and we're going to turn to Ryan, and he's going to tell you how you can participate. Hi, Ryan.
Hi, Petra. And hello to everybody that's out there on Facebook Live or here in the Zoom room with us. And I just want to encourage you, if you're in the Zoom room here with us, to go ahead and hit the raise your hand icon if you'd like to share or show an example of how this is working for you in your life. You can also put it in the comments section as well by typing it. For those who are on Facebook Live, obviously you can type that in the comment section as well too, and I will bring your questions here to the room. I do want to mention that I do keep the questions anonymous when they are in the chat, so feel free to get deep, get juicy, get interactive. And so the first one that I see here while I'm waiting for people to raise their hand here in the Zoom room comes from Facebook, and it asks, are there any differences between treating for physical healing versus mental healing, such as depression?
Oh, that's a great question. Ultimately, the answer to that is there's no difference. It's the same kind of work that we're doing. And we are, partly we also think about whether or not our depression is 1, situational, 2, chronic, and 3, organic, right? And so if these are things that we know, we can really focus our spiritual mind healing work, our spiritual mind treatment at the specific level. So if our depression is situational, right, not only can we do our treatment for the release of depression, we can also do our treatment for the shifting of whatever the situation is, and the recognition that we are not a victim of that situation, which is often what happens in a situational depression, is that we feel like we're helpless, we're hopeless, and there's nothing we can do about it, which is completely not true, because we have the infinite power of the universe backing us up. And there are always other ways of engaging with our lives. We have to sometimes make other choices. And we can be guided by wisdom and intuition for what's needed. And so we can do treatment around our engagement with the situation and changing the situation and the release of this sense of hopelessness or helplessness. If our depression is chronic, we can do definite and spiritual work about the expression of life. There is some spiritual wisdom, both from Louise Hay and from Ernest Holmes and from other people, that wonder whether depression isn't the inward turning of life. That we become depressed because instead of expressing our life outwardly, we turn it inward upon ourselves. And we either hamper ourselves from expression, we feel like we can't express, and again, there's that sense of hopelessness and helplessness. And so to do our spiritual work, to open the channels, that it's okay to express our lives. It's okay to express who we are and who we came here to be, whether that's acceptable or not, whether other people like it or not, right? We have come here to be the individualized expression of life as ourselves. And that is a magnificent outpicturing of love and life. And so we can do work with chronic depression exactly as definite and specific as we do it on physical healing. And we really are in that drip, 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 drip experience there. I think I've shared with you the story that I have about having panic attacks. And how over a 9-month period of time, I completely healed myself of panic attacks simply by doing this spiritual work of spiritual affirmations. And so that was the drip, 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 drip method, where I simply purified my consciousness that there was nothing to be depressed about or afraid of, not because the situation out here had changed, but because I knew the spiritual truth that I was an individualized expression of the infinite reality, and nothing can stand in the way of that. Nothing can stand in the way of that. No situation or circumstance is more powerful than the causal reality of spiritual truth. Do you see? That's what we're shifting. Not that we're manipulating the circumstances out here, but we're recognizing the truth of consciousness and reality. And we know that as that gets expressed, this out here does actually shift over time. And then if we have organic depression, meaning that there's something about the chemicals in our brain don't function as well as they could or should, right? We can really definitely and specifically work with that, just like we would work with the lowering of cholesterol, or the need to create a certain level of numbers in any test, right? And so if our serotonin or our dopamine or these things need to rise, we can certainly use the medication as we're really working with it, right? I never, ever, ever support people in getting off their meds. It's like taking insulin. If your body doesn't produce enough insulin, and the insulin is what allows you to be healthy, then for God's sakes, take your meds. And know that that as that's happening, your brain is really building that ability to heal itself and to create enough of those organic substances that are required, right? And then but you have to have the, what do we want to say, the tests to prove that before you get off your meds. And for God's sakes, if the meds are working, for God's sakes, stay on them, right? But it's the same thing. It's just like if you break your leg, for God's sake, stay on the crutch until your leg is healed. Please don't throw the crutch away and then do damage, right? That's why we have those things. The wisdom of the universe works through doctors and medications and allopathic medicine and alternative medicine and all the methodologies, if they are well used in a conscious and thoughtful manner. So I hope that helps answer the question. Yes, absolutely. We can use spiritual healing on things like depression and anxiety, those kinds of things. Thanks for the question. Ryan.
Yeah, so I just want to read this, and I want to encourage those who are in the Zoom room to raise your hand and share with us your experience, your questions, or your comments as well, too. But while I'm waiting for that, I want to read this. It says, I am stopped around doing treatments because I secretly believe that this will work for others in the area of health, but that I have no power here. If this doesn't work, then I'll be completely lost with nowhere else to turn. I guess I'm saying what to do about not having conviction due to fear. That will be the end for me if it doesn't work. The fear has more power. I sure don't want this. Either fear or being stuck or being powerless. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. Thank you so much for sharing it. And you are not by any means alone in this. We often find ourselves in the position where we believe that this works for others better than it works for us. So, first, we have a faulty idea about the way this works. So the comment was, I don't have any power. Actually, you're right. You don't actually have any power. It is the universe's power that you're working with. You don't have any power. The universe has power. The universal law of cause and effect has all the power that's required. So we can give up our belief that we need to have power. What we need to have is steady, constant, deliberate, focused attention. The disciplined work that we do on the end result. Our job is to stay doggedly convinced of the end result. It is the universe's job to have the power to make that happen. And you see, when I learned that, I relaxed so much, because that is the job of the universe. It's managing all of creation. This is one of the things that I did for myself. I thought, holy mackerel, this universal law of cause and effect is creating the universe. 13.8 billion years of creation and all of the unbelievably complex ways in which creation is showing up. Surely it can handle my comparatively tiny little piece of that. That has really, really helped strengthen my belief and my understanding that it is the universal power that I'm using. That's the first thing. The second thing is the way in which we build conviction is we start practicing. And this is so important. Start with little things, literally. Start manifesting parking places, green light waves. Start manifesting a $10 unexpected income. Start manifesting a call from a friend that you really want to have, right? Start manifesting small things, because it is in the small things that we begin to build the conviction that we are using a law that works. It's like you start with arithmetic and adding and subtracting before you do algebra. And then you learn algebra before you do calculus. These things build on each other. And so it is frightening sometimes to take this work and work on something that seems really like big life issues. And we become ready to work on those because we have grown our conviction that we're doing something definite, that we're using a law, that we can in fact use that law, and that if we use it correctly, it will absolutely work for us. So build conviction by starting small. And then keep growing those things. Plus, listen to other people's stories. Be inspired by their stories. Stop thinking of ourselves as the great exception, right? It works for everybody else but me, which is just a glorified victim consciousness. And it is a arrogant sense. It's basically arrogance. It says I'm the only one who's not part of the one. You are, of course, a part of the one. No one is not a part of the one. You're as much a part of the one as everybody and anybody else. And surely, if it can work for me or any other person in the world, it can work for you. Absolutely. Right? And so these are the things. This is the conviction that we begin to build within our own consciousness. And it can take time and be deliberate. Right? But eventually you will no longer be afraid. You will no longer be afraid to apply it to your own physical healing. Ryan.
All right, and I know I'll speak for myself, but I don't know about Richard, but you better calm down now. That's a lot
No,
over
no,
here.
no, I refuse to be calm about this. This is part of the exciting part of it.
I'm just kidding. Amp it up. It's Sunday morning. It's time to turn up.
It is.
And so with that being said, I'm going to call into the room Dennis.
All right, Dennis, come
Dennis,
on.
do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Good to hear from you.
Oh, good morning. Yeah, thanks for, good class this morning. Always good class, but this last paragraph that you led us through, pardon me, a comment you made reminded me of something that I don't know, I wasn't going to share it, and I thought, yeah, I will. Okay, where you right thought constantly poured into consciousness, and then you mentioned not when you're feeling well, blah, 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 constant.
Uh-huh.
Well, that got me to thinking, I discovered years ago by practicing this, when I start feeling sad or emotional or whatever the case may be, I get off track, it is the right thought in and of itself that lifts my spirits.
Yes. Yes.
It just does. And you get back on track. And then it's like, and the paragraph as a whole, I find to be an excellent explanation in layman's terms as to why it's so important that I treat until I demonstrate.
Yes. Good. Because you're dripping in, right?
Yeah. Just keep going.
Just
keep faith.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you, Dennis. You know, when you say something really important, this does not mean we deny the feeling or that we pretend we're not feeling it. It's that we look at the feeling and we ask ourselves, is there spiritual truth to this? Is this what I want to be focusing on? Is this how I want to be engaging with life? Right? And we use the right thinking to say, do I really have to be afraid of this? No, I don't have to be afraid of this. Do I really need to be all amped up about this? No, actually, I can turn my attention to trusting the universe. And so, especially those feelings that are in reaction to things that are going on outside of us. What we don't want to do is to treat away our basic feelings of grief, anger, or I don't really want to use the term depression. Grief, anger, or shall we call it being a little bit flat. Grief is simply the other side of love. It is appropriate to grieve, and the more we love, the deeper we grieve. But our spiritual truth, our right thinking, as Dennis points out, should take the sting out of our grieving. Yes, we're going to miss that person, but we know that their spirit has gone on and that they are on to the next great adventure of their life. And our grief is the natural outpouring of our love. And our right thinking gives us a place to stand while we are missing that person. Our anger, when it's clean anger, not associated with all kinds of, PTSD and the trauma and the shit in our backgrounds, but clean anger. Clean anger is the expression of boundaries that have been violated. Clean anger is the opposite of engagement and connection. When I'm connected and it's safe, right, I feel open and totally engaged. Clean anger says something has come in, something has happened that has caused pain. And that is to be noticed, and now I have to deal with that. I either have to shift what I'm doing, I have to be able to speak my truth to what somebody else is doing, and say that's not okay with me, right? So clean anger is actually the other side of our connection with each other. And that cool flatness, that sort of moody blue, kind of blue, not like clinically depressed, but that little bit of a depression, right? That's the other side of bliss. That's the other side of joy. And it is a natural breathing. Sometimes it's a natural rhythm of the human experience of the expression of our joy and then the waiting for the next expression, right? Just like we have winter and summer. We have the full summer that we harvest all of the bounty, and then everything gets to relax and to lie fallow for a while so that the next expression can come out. And in our culture today, you're not allowed to have those. I mean, you got to be going pedal to the metal on all the time. Holy mackerel, you got to be posting stuff out there on Facebook. Look at how great my life is, and and you've got to be sales, and you got to be cheerful all the time, and you got to but do you see? Being blue or being fallow does not mean you're morbidly sad. It means you're quiet, you're introspective, you're allowing things to just rest for a moment because the new impulse has not yet begun to express. So we're not trying to pretend that these emotions don't happen or that there's something wrong with them, especially when they're clean emotions and they're not hooked to, as I said, to layers and layers and layers of past unexpressed experiences. But when we are in the midst of things, we apply our right thinking. Is what I'm doing lying fallow for a moment, or have I allowed myself to become depressed based on outer circumstances that I feel like I'm a victim of? Do you see the difference? That's a very different thing. And now I apply my right thinking. Well, I'm not a victim of anything. The universe is causal, and the universe is causal as me. And so I'm going to know the truth about this situation. I'm going to expect it to resolve, which has nothing to do with this sort of fallow time. And so we want to become a little more self-aware, self-introspective, and a little more nuanced in our own understanding, where we are engaged with our own emotional responses and our own emotions. And part of right thinking, as Dennis pointed out, is it's actually, what is going on? Is this the spiritual truth? That's part of right thinking. And then we turn that thinking to what we know to be spiritually true. So thank you, Dennis, for sharing that. And, in the right thinking, let's just stop for a minute. Again, I want to, it's a challenging word. This is not about right and wrong thinking, right? Think of the Buddhists, the Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path is actually the path of alignment. It's the middle way, right? The Buddha, he became an ascetic. He ate on one bean a day, and he was thin, and he got sick, and he was no more enlightened then than he was before. And so then he got rescued by some lovely woman who took him home, and they fell in love, and he became a householder, and he made a ton of money, and he got very wealthy through all of this work, and he was no more spiritually enlightened or grounded. And so he decided to phooey on all of this, and he went and he sat down under the Bodhi tree, and he said, I'm going to sit on this Bodhi tree, I'm going to sit under this Bodhi tree by this river until I am enlightened, until I know what in the world is going on. And he sat there until he realized it's not the extremes. It's not the overindulgence of the extremes. It's the middle way. And the middle way is in alignment. Right thinking, right speech, right action, right vocation. Right thinking, right speech, right action, right vocation. I can't think in the moment of the other four. And right meaning right alignment. It's the same thing that in the biblical teachings of righteous thinking. Righteous thinking is not moral thinking. It's not righteous over somebody else's. It's right thinking which is in alignment with spiritual truth. That's what right thinking is. And when we align with spiritual truth, we can't help but allow that power, which is the universal power and presence, from pouring through us, because there's nothing in us standing in the way. Right? That's all we're ever trying to do. We're purifying the veil here so that that which is pouring out can pour through us and as us, clean and unfettered. All right, Ryan, I'm coming back to you.
Yeah, Petra, when you were talking about that feeling, I misheard you. I thought you said fat instead of flat. And I said to myself, I felt that last night.
Is that the COVID fat?
That's the COVID fat feeling that I have. Anyways,
Flat.
enough of my personal fatness. So I have a question that came in, and it says, with the various challenges of 2020, I have found anxiety arise in me when I am out around others. I'm fine 1 minute, but then the next I can feel the anxiety in my body. And my impulse is to pull back and retreat home. What would you suggest I do in those instances, since I am with others and not in a private setting?
That is a great question, right? So Ralph Waldo Emerson says if you can walk across a field of snakes knowing that you are absolutely protected, you don't need to wear your boots. But if you don't know for 100% that you're absolutely protected, for God's sakes, wear your boots. So we work at all levels, right? So you might stop and ask yourself, have I done everything I can to make sure that I am physically safe, right? Wearing a mask, hand sanitizing, socially distancing, all of those kinds of things. And you can actually ask somebody to back up. Say it's a little too close, right? So we do the stuff on the physical level. But on the spiritual level, this is what I do. When I go out and about, I do exactly the same thing that I do around my car. I put a shield of white light around me. I protect myself with my absolute belief that I am safe. And when I feel myself, the same anxiety arise, totally get it, right? Particularly with all the fear mongering that's been going on, or the just out and out denial, that to just extend my sense of myself energetically. I extend my sense of myself energetically, usually another foot or two out. And I recognize that this is my private space. And I affirm over and over and over again that I am protected by the light and love, which is the causal power of the universe, as I move in the world. And do you see, I'm being very intentional. I am adding my right thinking. And when I do that, and I recognize that I am using a universal law that must respond to what I am intending, then I remind myself, therefore, I don't need to be anxious. I don't need to be anxious, because anxiety and fear, of course, what's the very thing that we say, that which I have feared I've brought upon me. Right? It becomes the energetic, it becomes an attracting energy, because we are spending our mental coin on the fear and anxiety. So we want to reduce that to the best of our ability. So we reduce it by doing physical things, we reduce it by doing mental things, we reduce it by doing spiritual things. And all of these things, and then, I remind myself, I have no reason to be anxious. I have no reason to be anxious. I've done everything I can. I've set my circle, my protective shield, and so I am causal in my own life. And then I remind myself, and usually it's my human self, my little girl self, my self that has gotten accustomed to being anxious, and I remind myself, really, it's okay. I'm doing the work. I do actually have to do that work, though. Do you see? That's the point, is that I actually have to do that work, and I have to be intentional about it over and over and over again. The drip method, until eventually I realize I'm not anxious. I'm not stupid. I still protect myself physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. But I'm no longer anxious, because I see there's no reason for it. Do you see? I hope that's helpful to you. It's exactly the same thing we do when we do the prayer of protection, when we surround our car with white light. I think many of you, I've shared this story when Jason had his big motorcycle accident a little over a year ago. And I was going over there and spending time with him, and then I was working here. I was driving an hour back each way, back and forth from his house as I was caring for him. And I noticed that I was so physically exhausted, emotionally exhausted, and I'm pretty wigged out as a mom, about all of this. And I began making some pretty serious mistakes driving my car. Actually turned into a one-way street as people were coming down. I mean, I scared myself once or twice pretty badly. And so I began every single time I got in the car to deliberately surround my car with white light, surround my car in protection, knowing that the divine wisdom and intuition of the universe was flowing through me. So no matter how tired I was or not in my body I was, that I would know if there was something that I absolutely needed to be careful about or pay attention to, that I would know it. And there were a number of times where that came to me as I was driving, and I avoided things because of it. And so it's the same kind of thing, right? We do that around ourselves. We can use our spiritual tools at every level. And then the last thing I would say is to know what's going on in the world without feeding ourselves fear and anxiety, right? To know what's going on in the world without feeding ourselves fear and anxiety, and see the end result. See yourself coming through the pandemic healthy, fully having been healthy the entire time, and see yourself and the rest of us all coming through this in a really powerfully good way. Great question. Thank you. All right. Do we have any last thing we want to say before we close? Ryan.
We, as the God we, right?
The royal we.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of great examples, and I think I'll close out with one of these examples here because I know that a lot of us can relate to it. So somebody was writing about their brother was accepted to a particular doctor for their cancer treatment. Within 4 days of asking for a colon doctor for an appointment, it's a really quick response. And a lot of people have been waiting a long time to get an appointment with this particular doctor. The brother is very happy and is now seeing, the ailment lifted, and it's working. So the divine is working through this doctor to help the person. And no matter what, the spiritual mind treatment, you're attracting those things to yourself. And so by keeping that positive mental attitude, by keeping resolute in that, and building faith upon each instance where you see those smaller things, those larger miracles, quote unquote, can happen.
Yes. Brilliantly stated. Thank you for sharing that, right? Because we do understand that the infinite intelligence of the universe does in fact work through the doctors and the medicine and the methodologies, and that we are attracting exactly the perfect and right ones, and that there is that within us that knows what to take, what not to take, what to respond to, what to say yes to, what to say no to, right? We are reminding ourselves that in our spiritual mind treatments, everything is working toward the healing. Everything at every level. So thank you so much for sharing that. All right, the last thing I want to remind you of is that on December 11th, we have our Blue Holiday Ritual. It's a Friday night. We also need RSVPs for this. If the weather's not good, we're hoping to be able to have it inside. So please RSVP for our beautiful Blue Holiday Ritual, which we do. Sometimes the holidays are just challenging for people. In general, and for some people it may be exceptionally challenging this year. If you have lost loved ones or lost jobs or just been really at the downside of the pandemic, or just in general, if the holidays are a challenging time for you, again, we acknowledge the feelings that we have, and then we place them into a spiritual container and we lift each other up. So please RSVP for that as well. It's Friday night, December 11th. It's a beautiful holiday ritual. We will be telling you about Christmas Eve and about the Burning Bowl on New Year's. We have some really special plans that we're working on, and as soon as we know what they are, as soon as we can, we'll start putting them out. Please do always look at your spam. If you are feeling like you're not getting information from us, we are hearing that that the stuff we're sending out is might be going into your spam. So please regularly check it so that you can stay connected and know what's going on. All right, we love you very much. I love you. I love spending this time with you. Thanks for all your comments and sharing, and we'll see you in the celebration. And we'll see you when we see you. Have a beautiful and blessed day. Bye for now.